what are you suggesting for affordable housing?
So as a minimum, I believe I stated 25% at the last council meeting, but that was just a baseline starting point. I understand Councilor Kelly had submitted something today to the effect of 80%. Using that as the new baseline, I might suggest 75%. Just in talking with some developers and what might be feasible, but also we're not boxing ourselves in quite too much. I think 75% seems like a reasonable number. And then to take the councilor's amendment further, I believe she suggested of that 75% affordable, 70% of it, the local preference would be used for Revere residents, and of that 70%, and if I'm, all right.
Thank you, Tom.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Councilor Regenzio, yes, what I'm proposing is that was out of 100 units, say for an example, I was proposing 80. Out of that 80, I would like a 70% to be given preference to Revere residents. Out of that 70%, I would like 20% to be given preference to seniors and 20% to be given preference to veterans. However, having a brief discussion with Attorney D'Ambrosio, he did refresh my memory regarding some financing constraints that might be in place. 80% might be a little challenging for a developer to get financing at 80%, so I would be agreeable to 75%. And I think specifically what we need to realize here is that this is a great opportunity for us in terms of affordable housing and in terms of going towards meeting our requirements under 40B, and we need to take advantage of this opportunity now so that we can be assured it is a win-win for the city. So I think these amendments that that I'm putting before you tonight for your consideration will help us get there. So, okay.
And just a question, the 70% for Revere residents, are we allowed to do that? Is that
You're allowed to have a 70% local preference pool. And basically, so if sake of simplicity, if there's 10 units, we can say 7 of the 10, we set the parameters for what our local preference is, but it can only be just a preference. So it depends on what happens in the lottery. So the 133 Salem Street, that condominium project, we first did a pool of all eligible applicants that were Revere residents. And once we moved through that, we did a pool of all eligible veterans, and then the general pool. So as long as there are eligible folks to be in the local preference pool, in the veterans pool, and in the seniors pool, we are allowed to choose them up to 70% of the total unit count.
okay? And then the preference for seniors and veterans. If enough veterans or seniors don't apply, then what's the default?
The default would be the hierarchy could be defined by the city later on, but I think our intent would be you start with seniors, veterans, then go to Revere residents last. So essentially the 70% would fall under one of those 3 categories as long as eligible people apply.
Okay, and wouldn't the number of bedrooms in the unit govern what is asked for? I mean, if a senior is going to go in, they're not looking for a 2 or 3 bedroom, I'm sure. So wouldn't the mix of bedrooms have some sort of a bearing on?
That's correct. So the way it worked in 133 Salem is the lottery agent that was working for the developer worked with the city to identify which units would have which designation, taking those factors into account.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, through you to Tom, when we're categorizing senior citizens and veterans, are there going to be separate listings for each one, or are they going to be included in a group?
So I think for seniors might be an exception for the reasons that Councilor Argenzio noted, that there might be certain units set aside because we wouldn't want to give a senior a 3-bedroom unit. But I think with veterans, it would probably more fall under a general 70% of the units within those that are deemed affordable.
I'm just trying to think of a way to try and isolate and protect the veterans to make sure they get there, either a studio or a one-bedroom. I don't think they'll need 2 or 3 bedroom.
You don't think there'd be veterans that are, have families that would need affordable
Very
housing?
Very few, but
I mean, I think that's something that we could sort out working with the lottery agent and developer when we approach that point later on. There's a lot of marketing that takes place before the lottery actually happens, where we could identify sort of what that sweet spot is at that given point in time. But if you felt like, and you wanted to know, I don't think it needs to be in the zoning ordinance itself, but when this goes into effect, when the lottery goes into effect, we could identify studios and 1-bedrooms for veterans if that's what your recommendation would be.
yeah, I'm not sure you're gonna get a lot of veterans that are gonna look for 2 or 3 bedroom, because most of them are gonna go out and buy homes. But the guys and gals that come back or that are available would probably want a good size 1-bedroom or a good size studio. So, I just want to make sure there's some kind of a list, that a category for each one, for the seniors and the veterans. So when they do alternate, I don't know how they would pick them or they would get them, but I just want to make sure that they're taken care of.
The preferences are noted, and I think we can make that work in the lottery.
Thank you.
Mr. President, no? Oh, okay, thanks. Just before I call on my colleague here, I had intentions of probably holding this because we had some people that wanted 50%, some people that wanted 60%, now someone offered 80%, and so I'm kind of weigh the pros and cons, and why don't you give me an education on what's your idea? You come up with a 75%, which is another number that was.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, this is all a bit speculative, right? And that,
Right.
I think what we are trying to do here is thinking through a potential development we'd like to see, and then trying to make that work in zoning. But zoning, we're setting a long-term land use framework, right? So
Yeah.
it is a delicate balance between boxing ourselves in too much, but also recognizing, as the councilor did, we
Well,
have this main big affordability challenge. So
I agree the optimal is the most, but let's not make the good the enemy of the best, is my position. That if you overreach here, you might get nothing ever. I'm
Speak to that for one moment. So what I was just,
Councilor Kelly, go ahead.
thank you, but they are my amendments.
What's that?
They are my amendments, so I'd like to discuss.
I know they're your amendments, but
I'd-
we had amendments going in before your amendments. We had numbers that were presented.
When?
With the package. Well, it was.
It was only 20 to 25%.
Yeah. The planning board had numbers.
Okay.
It's irrelevant.
Okay, so
you come
we did
you come
hear-
up with amendments which are
we did hear that-
very nice. I mean,
Thank you.
I'm not arguing that they're not good.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to sort through what's the best.
I understand.
Is 60%
So we
more
heard,
optimal for the developer? We want this thing to happen, and I'd rather get 60% affordable than zero. 75 would be better, but
so what we heard from Attorney D'Ambrosio at the last meeting was that we want this project to be in harmony with the Chelsea housing project that's there.
of course.
That is probably near 100%. So if we want to keep this harmonious, the higher the better. The other thing that I thought I explained, but if a developer comes in and is unable to get financing because of the constraints that we put in through these amendments, we can amend it again and we can reduce it. So it's always an opportunity there for us to go and, decrease it a little. But I think putting it in up front is what really makes the project valuable for us, and we want to benefit Revere. And this has a possibility of really being able to contribute towards our 40B requirements. So to lose the opportunity and not seize it when it's in this particular location is in my opinion, something that we wouldn't want to do.